At the end of the day, you need to make a decision. But when you make the decision, you make it very clear that you make it after you've been influenced and you're responsive to that influence that you've received from your spouse.
Welcome, everyone, to Breaking Bread, the podcast brought to you by Apostolic Christian Counseling and Family Services. Excellent, as always, to have you along. Relationships are going to be our subject of conversation. Kaleb Beyer is with me today. And Kaleb, you are continually thinking about how can marriages be made stronger and more healthy. Mm-hmm. And you see that not only in the office, but also with the research that you do. Mm-hmm. So we're going to share a tip. Really, this is kind of a marriage tip. Am I right?
Yeah.
Which really actually expands to relationship tip.
It really does. Yeah, it can. I mean, this tip can apply to relationships in the body, relationships in the family, even relationships, parent-child, relationships.
Yeah, I think so. So let's come out with it. What's the tip? How would you summarize it briefly? Mm-hmm. And then we'll unpack it.
So the tip is accepting influence, which is based on certainly some research, but we would say also as believers, there's quite a bit of scriptural backing for receiving one another. Submitting one to another in the fear of the Lord
is a form of being influenced.
Yes.
So that's okay. So how did you say it? Accepting influence?
Yes.
Receiving?
Accepting
influence. So right out of the gate, well, let's talk about what that means. Okay. So what does accepting influence means? What is it? Maybe juxtaposition it with what it's not. Help us understand, pin in this idea of what it means to accept influence.
So accepting influence is receiving, it's accepting like your spouse's perspective, their feelings, their needs, meaning acceptance doesn't mean agreement. We've talked quite a bit about what acceptance means, what acceptance doesn't mean.
Right.
But in this case, acceptance is accepting influence. We can do it even when we disagree. We can be influenced by, allow the other to shape or impact me, right? As I'm accepting your influence, Matt, it means that I'm changed as a result of that.
I would think this idea is really germane to what relationship means at one level, right? Living human relationships are those relationships that when they intersect, there is a collective give and take and impact, mutuality, which we're calling influence.
Yeah. Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, without this, what exactly is the relationship could be asked.
True. Yeah. We don't have a mutual relationship.
But you must see this.
For sure. And it flows out of, I see it, and it also flows out of research. So if I can bore you a bit for some of the research, it flows out of some research conducted by Dr. Gottman and Jacobson. And it showed that in particular, men who accepted influence from their wives tend to have a happier and more satisfying relationship. Paradoxically, what the research also showed was, Matt, when the more influence, right, a spouse was willing to accept, the more influential they are.
Oh.
Right? So in my relationship with Ange, the more I'm willing to accept influence from Ange, consequently, the more influential I am to Ange. It kind of, in some ways, goes along with the adage, I'm sure you've heard it, they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Sure.
Is accepting influence at some level is communicating care for you.
Okay, so now that's interesting that the research that you quoted had to do with men. Is there a flip side of the coin to that? Or is there a dynamic there for women as well? I'm just curious what the research is saying.
Yeah, so certainly it's true for marriages in both instances that part of a healthy marriage is that the wife and the husband are accepting influence. But in particular, what the research found is that there seems to be something when the husband is accepting the influence, right, that impacts the marital satisfaction in a much stronger way So you need it for both. It's not saying, oh, it doesn't matter if wives, don't accept influence.
Yeah.
But there is something about that. And, I certainly we could talk about, what does that mean and what is that? But I think, but that's kind of what the research shows.
What do you see when you see couples that don't allow each other to influence? What does that look like?
So not allowing influence certainly leads to kind of disconnection, right? It leads to more conflict. It can lead to just like someone. So if we're talking about what not influence is not, we can kind of get into the yes steer syndrome. Have you ever, heard of that? It's like, yes, whatever you say, whatever kind of goes. And then what happens in relationship is there's not two people, right?
Right.
There is one saying, hey, this is how we're going to do it.
Yeah.
And the other one complying and going along.
Mm-hmm.
That's not accepting influence.
Right. Okay. So it seems like you're really giving space for two sovereign individuals, right?
Yeah.
That both have their own will, in a sense, their own autonomy, in a sense, right? The one is not collapsing into the other, and the other is not collapsing into the one. They both have those independently and then live together with that.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Yeah.
It's really, it's interesting that what health is
yes.
this influence.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And again, I think there is aspect, if you think about like what it means to accept influence, right? And so as we think in Scripture, like one of the things that comes to mind is you say that in Proverbs where it talks about in the multitude of counselors, right? Is there's this sense that relationally accepting influence means we take the wisdom and the experiences and the understanding of others, and it begins to shape how we make decisions and what we do. And so I think in that sense, it's saying I can disagree with you and I can accept your influence. Those aren't counter. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
I'm saying yes to you, even when I say, you know what? Actually, I think probably we should do this.
Yeah. That's helpful. I think when you just gave that illustration on what non-agreement means, but yet influence. Can you give another example of that?
Yeah. So let's just say, the husband would he's been wanting to buy a shotgun for quite some time. And he shares it with his wife, and his wife's like, I think actually we'd be better off saving up for family vacation this year. Right? So they have different perspective. And so what does accepting influence, look like? Perhaps it's husband reflecting, you know what? Family vacation benefits all of us. And related to where the finances are, I'm going to choose to wait on the shotgun. Right? Or a wife that, you know what? She really would like maybe some quiet time or downtime for the weekend, and the husband really wants to invite, someone over. You got two different perspectives, right? How do you step into that? You need to make a decision. And maybe it's the point, you know what? The wife decides, hey, based on, I know my husband, loves to have people over, and she's in a place to do it. So she accepts influence, based on where the husband is at and what she knows about him, right? She's influenced by who he is. Now, again, accepting influence doesn't mean I say yes, I'm just a yes person.
Then go there a little bit.
Yeah.
By not being, so what we should be hearing here is that yes does not make
the accepting
influence. There's something more here. There's something beneath the yes.
Correct. Yes. Yes.
I'm influencing him.
Yeah. Yes. It's, again, accepting influence is about making space for and receiving, you know what? This is who my spouse is. This is, their perspective, this is their needs, this is just their desires. And at the end of the day, there may be a no, right? The wife may be like, I'm spent. I can't do it this weekend.
Yeah.
But you know what? I know it's really important to you.
Yeah.
And so can we get something else on the calendar? It's not just like, no, we're not having it. You know what I'm saying?
And it's not just yes.
And it's not just yes. Exactly. It's not just yes, we're having it. Yeah. Yeah.
Does this really require conversation? Do two people that influence one another, does this fuel conversation? I'm wondering, because if we're going to get behind the yes, there's a lot of meaning there, right? Anyway, I'm just kind of thinking out loud there.
Yeah, well, so I'm not sure if this is where you're going with that or not, but I do think, so at some level, you need to know each other, right? I mean, I need to know my spouse well enough to be influenced by them. Does that make sense?
That's helpful.
Like, I think part of a relationship, just the other day, somebody was sharing with me, they showed up, with a coffee and shared it with, they knew they loved coffee. And so, and they're like, you know what? So a small act of kindness that is influenced by, you know what? I'm going to share that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
so not a conversation per se, but a deep knowing is required to live in a relationship where we appropriately influence one another. That's helpful.
Yeah. There's some things that get in the way of accepting influence, right? Sometimes we're just not great at accepting influence, whether it's us being avoidant of a difficult conversation where we know we're different, right? Or becoming defensive is also a barrier to receiving influence. If I'm defensive, I'm not in a posture of accepting and receiving and welcoming the perspective or the feelings, needs of another, right?
Yeah.
And then sometimes we have like this kind of, we would call it all or nothing thinking, right? Black and white. There's just one way.
Yeah.
And oftentimes things are more nuanced than just, this is how it should be.
Yeah.
And that stands in the way.
Does any of this play along lines of kind of the playbook that a person has coming into marriage? Like, this is my role in marriage. Does that make sense? And not have this idea of influence as important.
Right. Yes, for sure. So certainly, as we think about what is I was recently minded, Matt, of, we oftentimes, when you go to look for a job, right? You have an interview. Well, what do you bring? Your resume. They look at, what's the history? When you go for a doctor checkup, what do they ask you? What's your medical history? What about your parents or your grandparents? Any heart issues? History. And so similarly, as individuals, right, we come into the marriage with what? History. And some of that history can shape us in a way that, if we don't have a good model of receiving and accepting influence, that I can be received, that we can disagree and still be in relationship, then it's going to be really hard. It's going to feel like it's a win-win, or rather, there's one winner, right?
Oh, right.
It's more of a
win-lose.
Win-lose. There you go. And so yes, I think it's shaped by our experiences, whether it be in family. How was conversation modeled when there were differences? Were they able to hear each other? Were they able to be influenced by and shaped by others, or friend, groups?
Yeah, I think we're partly answering this already with some examples, but I really like you. So you mentioned that defensiveness. I think that makes sense, that would be perhaps a sign that I'm not accepting influence like I ought. What's behind some of the defense? What makes a living like this difficult?
Some things come to mind that make it difficult, Matt. So one, if there has been ongoing hurt in the relationship, right, where there isn't a relationship where there's safety, where we can openly share and hear each other, or where it feels like one's, being attacked, right? In the way something is shared as we're communicating, it can certainly lead to a sense of defensiveness or a defensive response. And sometimes defensiveness just comes out of our own stress or what's going on in our life. Or I was defensive to my wife on Sunday and it didn't have anything to do with her. And she, brought up a text from one of our kids. And my response to her, I was not receiving influence from her. And it didn't have anything to do with her. Something else happened that morning that frustrated me. And I was bringing that into the conversation and I was defensive.
So lots of reasons. Pride would be another one, right?
Yes.
And that maybe goes back to that. If I'm a real black and white thinker, I've got the answer.
Right. I think
I resist your influence, right? Might be part of the posture that we can have.
Right. Humility, acknowledging, I
would have to think that I'm wondering if it's somewhat scary for some to say, okay, I'm going to step into this accepting influence because my spouse isn't. And it's easier for us both not to than just me to. It seems to me for this to be really, really healthy, we both have to do it.
Yeah, correct. Right. And I think, again, going back to the research, paradoxically, when one starts to be influenced by the other, they have more influence on the other, right?
So I think that's a real key here to this conversation. That's a real help to that person that's like, I'm kind of afraid to try this.
Right. And I think, so some of that is a conversation, Matt, right? Like with a spouse or a friend, or is beginning to, where in this conversation, maybe that's an exercise that we do, right? This next week, where's a place that I can say yes to this person, even when I'm saying no to their particular perspective, right? And how do I lean into that and communicate that and say, you matter to me. You are important to me. Your perspective is important to me, even when I see it differently, right? And I think that is like saying, I'm receiving you and communicating that.
Is it important for that? I'm wondering if there is value when saying that yes, when you can, when your heart says no. Is it important for that to be made clear? Like, you know what, I'm saying yes to you. I'm saying yes to this, even though my heart is saying no. Or like, I'm just curious how do we play this game in a way that communicates what we want to communicate, rather than, to your previous example, the husband saying, awesome, she wants people over. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
She said yes when she was just being influenced.
Yeah. All yeses are not the same.
Yeah.
And I think the nuance behind that and being able to communicate that is really helpful because, and I think that's part of also the understanding of knowing your spouse, of like, wow, when they were at a place, I know that they would rather have a night off, and they're like saying, okay, that impacts me.
Yeah.
Or at least it should impact me.
I think knowing your spouse, I think, is really, really key. And that doesn't happen in the moment, just as you live together, knowing that, you know what, my wife doesn't have a posture towards having lots of people over, and growing in that awareness, I think, is key. And the other thing that you mentioned, I think, is key is that honesty. Really, what we're or not trying to be disingenuous with our yes,
right?
But being honest about our yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, being honest about our yes, and when we have a no, right? When we have a no about, I don't think we should do this, that it's not a no to you, right? You're important to me, you matter to me, and actually you bring some really important perspectives, even when actually, I think we should do this.
I think that's key, Kaleb. I'm not saying no to the person, I'm saying no to something else. That's deeply relational. What you're calling here us to is to have deep relationships with our spouses, or however this applies to the relationships we have.
Sure.
Right?
Sure. Yeah. I can see that in just as a father, right? How do I how do I accept influence from my kids, even when, I tell them I'd like them to do such and such.
Yeah.
And that's receiving and accepting influence about where they are and their perspective, and not just, you're going to do this regardless.
Yeah.
In the area of just what is not accepting influence is dismissing the opinions, the perspectives, the thoughts of another, whether that's a spouse, whether that's a friend, whether that's, or somehow comparing, right? Like one over, right? Like my idea, my thought is better. We can get into that as well, which is, it puts us in a place that we're not receiving, not welcoming, not accepting, and saying yes to the other, but we're kind of in this place of, in some ways, putting ourselves over the other, which goes back to, in some ways, the pride that we talked about rather than humility of receiving. But it breaks down the relationship rather than builds and deepens the relationship.
I really like that example and dismissive in the way that you painted that. There's a way of not accepting influence that just keeps two people kind of separated and not allowing the other person in. But this way you painted that, it's like, no, that's beneath me type of thing, right? Which is kind of another insult to another level that breaks down influence, right?
Yep. Yeah.
What would be the next step, or how would you help a couple excel at this?
I think it is just really healthy for us to find ways to say yes to our spouse, even when we're saying no to a certain decision or direction, and explicitly being able to say that. Because there are going to be disagreements, and we do need to make a decision, and we need to move in a certain direction.
Yep.
And so at the end of the day, you need to make a decision. But when you make the decision, you make it very clear that you make it after you've been influenced and you're responsive to that influence that you've received from your spouse.
And that's really, really helpful. Kaleb, I think that really, really says it well. And that yes we're saying is that yes to the person. The decision might be no. The decision might be yes. But whatever the decision is, it's said with a yes to the person.
Yeah.
And that's what we need to capture.
Yep.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate that. Super simple. When it comes down to it, right?
Yes. Simple, not easy.
Simple, but not easy. Much of life is that way. Thanks a lot, Kaleb. Really appreciate it. Thanks each one for being on. I trust that this blesses you as you think about your relationships in many different places, what it looks like to be influenced and to influence well. God be with you.